He never saw her. Not once in 8 months. Not for a single morning across all the time she had spent keeping his life running without friction. And the worst part was not the silence. The worst part was the morning she realized she had stopped minding it and started waiting for something she had no right to want. Maybe you know that feeling. To do everything right and still be invisible. To love someone quietly enough that no one ever has to know. This story begins the way those stories always do, in a polished building full of important people, where one woman learned that silence has a breaking point, and in Miami on a glass and salt air morning with Biscayne Bay going silver outside the windows, hers arrived on the back of a laugh she never meant anyone to hear. The tower that housed Drax Capital stood on Brickell Avenue, like a statement no one had asked to read. 42 floors of dark glass and clean steel, the kind of building where problems were solved before lunch and the lobby flowers were changed every Tuesday without anyone noticing who did it. Thea Baird arrived at 7:20 every morning, which was 15 minutes earlier than her contract required and 30 minutes before anyone with a title would appear to notice. She liked the building before it woke, liked the hollow sound of her heels on marble when no one else was there to step around, liked the way the bay looked from the east-facing windows at that hour, pale, wide, indifferent to the ambition stacking up in the floors above it. She was 24 and had come to Miami from Tampa with a business degree, a second-hand suitcase, and the kind of self-discipline that people with comfortable lives never have reason to develop. Her mother had worked nights at a distribution warehouse for most of Thea's childhood. There had been no cushion, no safety net, nothing between ambition and necessity except effort. So Thea worked hard, kept her head down, asked for only what she had earned, and arrived early to jobs that had no reason to reward the habit. Her desk sat outside the executive suite on the 38th floor, 3 feet from the private entrance to Caspian Drax's office. From there she managed everything that carried his name. Schedules, travel, communications, the invisible machinery that let powerful men believe their lives moved by their own will. She was good at it. She was by any measure she could reach, excellent at it. For 8 months he had walked past her desk without seeing her. It would have been easier if Caspian Drax had been ordinary. He was not. He was the kind of man whose stillness commanded a room, the way movement commanded one in other people. 40 years old, built with an unhurried precision that said he had never needed to chase anything. Dark coloring, close-cropped hair, a jaw that suggested he found most things quietly beneath his attention. He wore charcoal and navy and black, and moved through the floor with the particular authority of a man who understood, bone deep, that he did not need to hurry. Officially, he ran one of the most aggressive real estate development firms in South Florida. Unofficially, the rumors that traveled through break rooms and elevator rides in low voices spoke of other things. Port logistics, old alliances, handshakes that never made it into contracts. Thea had been careful not to look too closely. She had been even more careful not to look too long. That had gotten harder in January. There had been a girl in the lobby that afternoon, maybe 7 years old, sitting alone on a marble bench with her backpack in her lap and tears tracking down her face. Her mother was somewhere in the crowd. Security was on another call. 3 senior associates had walked past without slowing. Caspian had been mid-sentence on his phone, moving toward the private elevator. He stopped, ended the call without finishing it, crouched down in a suit that cost more than Thea's monthly rent until he was level with the child's face, and said something she could not hear from where she stood near reception. The girl pointed somewhere to the left. He stood, spoke 2 quiet words to the nearest security guard, and walked to the elevator without waiting to see what happened next. He was gone before the girl's mother came running. Thea had stood there with a stack of folders pressed against her chest and understood, calmly and completely, that she was in serious trouble. After that, she noticed too much, the way he listened in meetings, longer than men with less to prove ever did, the way he remembered the names of building staff that no one expected him to know, the particular tiredness around his eyes some Thursday afternoons, as if holding the shape of himself together cost something he paid in private. She had no business seeing any of it. She saw all of it anyway. By March, she had made the quietest, most inconvenient mistake of her adult life. On the Tuesday, everything shifted. The bay outside was the color of hammered pewter, and the office held the taut quiet of a building waiting on weather. Thea was at her desk by 7:20, same as always. She had already flagged 2 scheduling conflicts, redirected 4 misdirected emails, and completed the afternoon board prep before the first associate stepped off the elevators. She wore a pale gray blouse and dark trousers. Her dark hair was pinned back in a braid neat enough for the building, and plain enough not to ask for attention. At 8:30, the private elevator opened. The floor responded the way it always did, not dramatically, not with visible deference, but with a subtle collective realignment. Conversations shortened, postures adjusted. Caspian Drax walked off the elevator with his phone in one hand and his coat over the other, and the morning reorganized itself around him without being asked. Thea rose from her chair, same as always. "Good morning, Mr. Drax." His eyes stayed on his phone for 3 more seconds, then a nod so small it might have been gravity, and he was past her, one hand already reaching for the office door. No pause, no glance, no recognition. She sat back down, opened the first file on her screen, did not let herself feel it, the small cold sting of it, the way hope survives on almost nothing and still manages to get itself hurt. It was nearly 10 when Cade Sutton appeared at the edge of her desk. He worked in building security, 1 floor down, and had found reasons to be on 38 more and more often over the past 6 weeks. 29 years old, broad-shouldered, with an easy grin and the kind of unhurried friendliness that cost him nothing because nothing in his life had yet made it expensive. He was holding a brown paper bag from the Colombian place on the corner. "You look like you haven't eaten since yesterday," he said. Thea looked up. "I had coffee." "Coffee is not breakfast." He set the bag on her desk. "Beef empanada, still hot. Don't argue with me about it." She stared at the bag. "You went all the way down to 8th for this." "It's 3 blocks and worth it." He leaned against the desk edge with the ease of a man who had never been made to feel he was in the wrong place. "Also, I owe you for covering that calendar thing last week, so just say thank you and eat the food." She laughed. It came out before she could stop it, real, unguarded, the kind of sound that had not lived in this building in longer than she could remember. Short but completely uncontrolled, too warm for marble floors and glass walls, and a floor where people smiled only as a deliberate act. Inside the office, Caspian Drax looked up from the contract on his desk. The sound did not belong to the room. He was certain of that. Certain enough that he was already standing before he understood why. Brant, his head of security, seated at the side table with a file open in front of him, watched the change cross his face and said nothing. He had worked for Caspian Drax for 5 years. He had learned to read the small movements. Caspian opened the office door and stepped into the corridor. The sight of it landed harder than it should have. Thea was standing behind her desk with her head tipped back, the last trace of laughter still in her expression, one hand resting near the paper bag. The man from downstairs was leaning close. Not touching, but close enough to suggest familiarity. The scene was small, ordinary, probably. Something moved through Caspian's chest with the force of a tide pull. The office felt the shift immediately, not because he raised his voice, he did not. But the quality of the air around him had changed into something that made people step back from doorways they had been filling. Thea turned before he reached the desk. She felt it first as a pressure change, the strange alertness of a room becoming aware of itself. Then she saw him. He was 12 feet away and looking at her. Not through her, not past her, at her. Every nerve in her body fired at once. "Mr. Drax," her voice came out level. She was proud of that. He stopped at the edge of her desk. "Who is that?" Not a question. Brant appeared from the office doorway. "Cade Sutton, security, lower floors." Caspian did not look at Brant. "Tell him he's needed downstairs." Cade read the room faster than most would. He straightened, picked up the coffee he'd set down, and gave Thea a look she couldn't fully interpret. Part concern, part understanding of something she hadn't said yet. "Catch you later," he said, and was in the elevator before the floor had fully processed what had just happened. "Mrs. Baird." Thea's stomach dropped. She reached for her notepad on instinct, though she had no idea what she expected to write. Her heels sounded too deliberate on the marble as she crossed to the office. Passing Caspian at close range was like moving through a pressure field. She smelled cedar and salt air and something cold from his morning walk. The door closed behind her with a quiet click that seemed much louder than it was. The office was warmer than the corridor, the bay filling the glass behind his desk with flat gray light. He did not sit. He came around the front of the desk and stood watching her with an attention she did not know how to hold for long without giving herself away. "You were laughing," he said. "I can pull the afternoon schedule if you need it." "That's not what I'm asking." Heat climbed her throat. "I'm not sure what you are asking." "I've walked past your desk every morning for 8 months." His voice stayed even. That made it worse. You say good morning. You hand me what I need. You do the work without mistakes, without complaints, without asking for anything. He paused. Something moved behind his expression, careful and reluctant. In all that time, I have never once heard you sound like that. She swallowed. Like what? Like you were somewhere you actually wanted to be. The words landed in the center of her chest and did not move. She looked at him. Maybe no one gave me a reason. A long silence, his jaw tightened. He took one step, slow enough to be deliberate, and he did. He was being kind. That's exactly the problem. He held her gaze. Because the first time I actually look at you, you're looking at someone else like he matters. Her breath caught so sharply it hurt. The office shrank around them. Every polished surface, every pane of bay-lit glass, every silent line of the room pulled tight around that one sentence. She should have looked away. She didn't. Why would that matter to you? For one suspended beat, he said nothing. Something moved across his face, quiet, raw, a truth dragged into light before he was ready to face it. Because I haven't been able to stop noticing you, he said. His voice dropped. And I've been trying not to for longer than you know. Thea's pulse went sideways. Go back to your desk. The dismissal came too suddenly, like a door shutting after a rush of heat. She went. The next morning her desk was gone. Not relocated, gone. The chair, the monitor, the bay photograph she kept near the lamp, the blue ceramic succulent. In its place, polished floor and the faint rectangle in the carpet where the legs had rested for 8 months. The floor manager was already waiting with the expression of a man who wished this assignment had gone to someone else. Mr. Drax has reassigned your workstation, he said, his voice low. Through the office glass, a second desk stood to the right of Caspian's own, close enough that he would only need to lift his eyes to find her. Her succulent sat on its corner like it had always lived there. She walked inside without knocking. Caspian looked up from a contract. Already in his jacket, already composed, already 3 steps ahead of whatever she was about to say. You moved my desk, she said. Yes. Into your office. Yes. She waited for elaboration. He returned to the contract. You'll manage all communications from here. Anything for my signature comes through you first. Legal stops going around you. When did you plan this? He looked up. Yesterday. Yesterday she thought of his voice in that office, of the sentence she had carried home and not slept around. Apparently she had underestimated it. People will talk, she said. They already are. You don't care. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. I'd prefer they notice. Warmth rushed up her throat before she could catch it. She sat down. The chair was unfamiliar and creaked softly. From where she sat she could see the texture of his tie, the scar below his left ear, the shadow under his eyes that said he hadn't slept any more than she had. For 8 months, she had learned him in fragments across a corridor. This was different. This was being placed directly in his line of sight with no buffer remaining. He handed her a file without looking up. Board prep at 11. You're in the room. I always did the board prep. Now you do it in the room. She pressed her lips together, opened the file, kept her face arranged. When a junior associate appeared in the doorway with documents, Caspian didn't reach for them. Leave those with Ms. Baird, he said, and went back to reading. By mid-afternoon, something was wrong. Brandt came in at 3:15 with his tablet and the expression of a man past the part where bad news was still uncertain. He spoke to Caspian at the window for 4 minutes. Thea caught fragments. A name she didn't recognize, a building she did, Brickell Point, a vehicle description. Caspian turned to her when Brandt left. He did not pretend. Someone was at the lobby desk this morning, he said, asking about your schedule, whether you drove or took the train. The room went cold. Related to you, she said, not a question. He picked up an envelope from the far edge of his desk and placed it in front of her. Inside was a photograph, her taken last evening on the Brickell City Center walkway. Gray jacket, crossbody bag, earbuds in, waiting at the intersection on 8th Street for the light. She stared at it for a long time. There was a note, he said. Careful men keep careful things hidden. His jaw tightened. They're not warning you, they're measuring me. She didn't go home that night. Caspian made the arrangements with the same efficiency he applied to acquisition reviews, and she was too shaken to argue about all of it. She argued about some of it. He listened to none of it. His apartment on Brickell Key was all dark wood and bay light, and the particular quiet of a life kept at deliberate distance from warmth. She slept in a guest room with causeway lights cutting slow gold lines across the ceiling, and lay awake listening to him on the phone at 2 in the morning, voice low words she couldn't quite place. She did not ask about it in the morning. She did ask about the photograph. He told her about the group. Old money, old grievances, men who had learned that direct pressure was expensive and had started looking for softer angles. The explanation was calm and complete and thoroughly frightening. "I should have kept more distance," he said. She looked at him across his kitchen counter. "You told me you hadn't been able to stop noticing me." A silence. "I know. You can't unsay that and call it a mistake." "I'm not unsaying it." The muscle in his jaw moved. "I'm saying I should have known that the moment I stopped pretending, they'd see it too." "So now what? You send me away?" "No." The word came out harder than he meant it. "I keep you where I can see you." She thought about pointing out that this was not solely his decision. She looked at the control it was costing him to hold still in that kitchen and understood that the thing frightening him most was not men with cameras. "I have conditions," she said. He waited. "When this is over, I go back to my desk outside." "No. Caspian. That desk is gone, non-negotiable." She folded her arms. "You are completely unreasonable. You can negotiate the desk later." He pushed a coffee toward her across the marble counter. "When there's no one watching your sidewalk." She took the coffee. She did not agree. She stayed. It happened on the third night. She heard nothing from the lower level. The building was too well built for sound to travel easily. She had been reading on the couch, waiting for Caspian to finish a call, when the study window cracked. A single fissure running corner to center, the kind a high-velocity impact left in tempered glass. She was already moving when he came through the study door. What followed was 12 minutes she could not organize into a clean sequence afterward. 2 men, possibly 3. The specific cold horror of being ordered to stay still by someone with nothing to lose. A sound from the direction of the hall that made her stomach turn to stone. Then Brant was there, and 2 others, and it was over in the way violence ends. Suddenly the room left holding both too much and too little. Caspian was on the hall floor, back against the wall, his right hand pressed to his side. Not the worst place, not nothing either. Thea was beside him before she registered moving. "How bad?" She got her hands over the wound before Brant could reach them. "Manageable," Caspian said. "You're bleeding." "I'm aware." "Caspian." Thea, his free hand found hers, the one not pressed against him, closed around it. "Are you hurt?" The question broke something open in her. "No." Her voice came out unsteady. "I'm not hurt." He exhaled with his whole body, eyes closed for 1 second. Then open, finding hers, looking at her the way she had spent 8 months imagining he never would. As though she were the only fixed point in a room that had gone completely wrong. "I managed my distance from you for 8 months, he said. Each word measured at a cost beyond blood. "The night I stopped, they sent the photograph. I should have known. I should have kept you out of this from the beginning. You didn't put me in it. I made you visible." She looked at him, at the fury and the exhaustion and the thing underneath both of them that he had been holding in since a Tuesday morning when she'd laughed in a hallway and started all of this. "Caspian, say what you mean." He was quiet long enough that she thought he wasn't going to. Then very quietly, "I love you, and I am sorry they saw it before I had the chance to say it to you first." The words went through her like something physical. She leaned forward until her forehead was near his temple and stayed there. "Then say it again." He did. The men who had sent the photograph were handled in the particular silence of Caspian's world. She did not ask for details. She asked only to be told when it was over, and he told her, and she believed him. She did eventually go back to her desk outside. It took 3 weeks, 1 formal written request submitted through proper channels, and a negotiation she suspected he had let her win on purpose. He countered with a memo declaring the desk placement a security arrangement not subject to standard HR protocol. She responded in a single line, "You don't get to call this security, you just don't want me out of your sight." His reply came in 4 words, correct, non-negotiable, "Good morning." She saved that one. The floor at Drax Capital stopped whispering after the first 2 weeks. Not because people had lost interest, they hadn't, but because the energy of it had shifted from speculation to something that looked a lot like acceptance. Caspian Drax had spent years making himself unreachable. Then one ordinary Tuesday morning, a laugh in a corridor had undone 8 months of careful distance in the space of a breath. That was the version the 38th floor told itself, and it was close enough to true. What they didn't know, what only Thea knew, was that it had not really started with the laugh at all. It had started on an afternoon in January when she watched him crouch down in his $1,200 suit for a small frightened child in a lobby full of people who had chosen to look away. She had understood then, without anyone telling her, that the most dangerous man she had ever stood near was also the most careful one with things that mattered. She had been falling toward him from that moment. She had simply been the only person in the room who knew it. On the Thursday evening after everything was settled, she was at her desk. The outside one, which she had won provisionally, when he came through the door at 7:15 and stopped where she was sitting. "You're still here," he said. "I'm always here." "I know." He stood looking at her the way he had started to, openly, without arrangement, as if the effort of not looking was something he had finally set down. "I wasted 8 months of it." Thea looked up at him. The bay was dark behind the glass. The floor was quiet. The city moved far below, indifferent and unceasing, full of people who would never know that up here, in a glassed building on Brickell Avenue, the most controlled man she had ever met had finally learned how to stay in one place long enough to see who had been there all along. "Stop counting," she said. "Start now." He sat on the edge of her desk, which he had never done before, and stayed there long enough that the city beyond the windows stopped mattering entirely. Which was, she thought, exactly where she had always known this was going.